Anyway, let's move on to the next Kimba thing. I don't really have much to say about the 1991 symphonic poem film, because just like the 1966 film, it is basically just a summary of events from the first series. There isn't really anything within these two films that I didn't already cover, so yeah, let's move on. In 1993, we got a re-release of the original 1965 series. It's the same footage, just shortened down and with a completely new Canadian dub.
So that's why he was picking on me the other day. I'm sorry. It's okay. It doesn't matter what everybody else says. I'm me.
Now, there isn't really anything new to mention about this series when it comes to the Lion King controversy, but I figured I'd mention it because it is interesting that it exists, and it was kind of amusing to see how they would rewrite some of the more inappropriate lines from the original series.
He was a lion! You have no right to call him names just because he was white!
I am a lion! Now apologize for calling my father inferior!
Kimba, your fur is white because you come from a long line of great leaders.
I hope I can be like my ancestors as well as look like them.
Yes, Kimba.
Andropolis had strength and wisdom that he passed down from generation to generation. With strength and wisdom, he and his descendants were able to make those around them safe and happy. Kimba, you're like this too.
In 1997, we got the Jungle Emperor Leo film. Basically, this is a feature-length adaptation based on the second half of the manga. It includes several storylines from the sequel series TV show, and overall the presentation is much better than the other Kimba titles I've covered. Both the animation and music are pretty great. However, the story structure is kind of all over the place. It kind of just jumps between several different plots and ideas without really fully committing to any of them. Overall, it feels like a movie that had trouble deciding what it wanted to be. There are several scenes in this movie that just feel really out of place. If it just committed to one storyline, then I probably would have enjoyed it a lot more. Still, it's not absolutely terrible, all things considered, even if there is the odd moment that comes off as unintentionally hilarious.
At last they're mine. All the money, all the power. Delicious.
Just like the manga, Kimba winds up dying at the end, and we get that symbolic cloud shot to end the film on. Once again, it is a completely different context than what takes place in The Lion King, but I've already explained that.
This is my dying wish. You must eat my flesh and clothe yourself with my fur.
Now, as I've already mentioned, there are countless examples of people comparing this footage to The Lion King despite it coming out 3 years after, and the overwhelming amount of visuals being compared are ones that did not exist until this film. Now, even though this film is a retelling of the second half of the manga, the images you see here are not recreations of images in the manga. They are exclusive to this 1997 film, so it doesn't make any sense to include these shots as evidence that The Lion King ripped off Kimba. If you truly believe in the argument you're making, why on earth would you feel the need to use illegitimate examples to back up your claims? By doing so, you are only making your claims look less legitimate, and it seems like almost every single YouTube video and published article uses footage from the 97 movie. This is the 1997 movie. What are you doing? This is the 19... Why are you even putting that there? This is the 19... This is from 1996. Why do all the Kimba people keep putting the 1997 movie in here? Why do they keep doing that? You're using clips from the 97 movie! What are you doing? You don't know what you're talking about! Now, there's a good chunk of people using the 97 movie in their comparisons who have just never seen Kimba and they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. But there are also Kimba fans who still consider this to be a legitimate comparison despite the film coming out 3 years after The Lion King. It is fairly common knowledge among the Kimba crowd that this film actually started production in the 80s, and due to a variety of factors including budgetary issues and Tezuka's death, this film went through sort of a development hell. Now, I took this information at face value and had no reason to question it, but just like many other claims from the Kimba crowd, when I actually tried to look into it, I couldn't find any evidence. It's not found on either the English or the Japanese wiki for the film. It's not found on any articles covering the subject, and in the 2004 book from Fred Patton, who is arguably the most well-researched on the subject, he doesn't even mention it despite mentioning the film itself. If this film started production in the 80s and went through development hell for 10 years, why would he not mention that in his book? He even mentions many fans considering the choice of imagery for this film being too similar to The Lion King as being deliberately provocative. That right there would be the point to mention, oh, by the way, this film actually started production in the 80s, so it doesn't really matter anyway. But that is not found anywhere in this book. Every single mention of this claim just points back to the Kimba crowd saying it without actually providing a source. Patton himself mentions that one of Tezuka's last business decisions was to authorize the 1989 remake series, which makes sense because he died in 1989, but when talking about the 1997 film, there is no mention of Tezuka having being involved at all. I am seriously starting to doubt that this film was in production in the 1980s like the Kimba crowd is claiming. And if you look at other anime films released the same year, it becomes clear that a 10-year-long production is pretty out of the ordinary. Miyazaki started writing Princess Mononoke less than 3 years before its release, and Perfect Blue didn't even have a budget until 2 years before it got finished. If this film was in production in the 80s and Tezuka's death wound up postponing it by 10 years, then why was the 89 remake series seemingly not affected at all? The only mention of this film being in production in the 80s is from the 2003 Anime Works DVD release of this film. It is on this disc that they show the film's trailer, and at the very end you can see copyright 1987 Tezuka Productions. And to be perfectly honest with you, after thoroughly researching this, I genuinely believe that this was a typo. Oh, what a difference a single number can make. If this number was not meant to represent the release date of the film, but instead the release date of the trailer or initial date of the film's production, it would be the only trailer on this entire disc that decided to do so. On this same disc, we see the trailer for Virtua Fighter, and its copyrights are listed as 1995 for its initial airing and 2000 for its DVD release. Another trailer on this disc is for Fortune Quest, which lists its copyright as 1997. Once again, the actual date of its release. Another trailer on this disc is for Magic Knight Ray Earth, and the copyright year is for its DVD release. Now, before some of you jump to conclusions, I should mention that not even the Kimba crowd is claiming that this film was released in 1987, and at the end of the film itself, we can see that Anime Works is not claiming this either. So with this one number on the trailer on this specific 2003 DVD release of this film being the only mention of the 1980s in association with this film anywhere, I think it's pretty fucking safe to say that this was just a typo. According to the Japanese wiki for the film, the production company Shochiku didn't even contact Tezuka Productions until about 3 or 4 years before the film's release. And this is backed up by 2 different literary sources, meaning that the absolute earliest this film would have started production would be 1993, and it's entirely possible that the production for this film didn't even start until much later than that. And with so much of the imagery from this film in particular seeming intentionally provocative, that would actually make a lot of sense. You don't have to look very far at all to find evidence of Kimba-associated production and distribution companies intentionally fanning the flames of this controversy to promote the sale of their own products. And who can even blame them when they believe that the entire success of The Lion King is something that they are rightfully owed? Could it be possible that the new similarities found within this film were done intentionally as a response to The Lion King? Based on everything else I've seen, it honestly would not surprise me at all. To be perfectly honest with you, it seems as though this film was only even made to capitalize on the success of The Lion King. After doing even more research, I found an article from the editor-at-large at Anime News Network, and he claims that the film didn't start production until 1994, which is the same year that The Lion King was released. Now, even if by some miracle all of this information was incorrect, or even if there was a full trailer for this film before The Lion King even started their storyboards, it still would not even cover all of the shots that the Kimba crowd uses from this film in their comparison videos. This would just be more vaguely similar shots to add to the pile from the well over 3,000 minutes worth of Kimba, and that's really not all that unlikely when we're comparing decades worth of Kimba footage to a single 90-minute animated film about lions in Africa. And if this information is true and the production likely didn't even start until after The Lion King was released, then by your own logic you should therefore believe that Kimba also ripped off The Lion King, right? Now, when this film premiered at a North American Film Festival, Disney supposedly sent a cease and desist letter, which is not the same thing as a lawsuit regardless of what a certain viral Twitter thread might say. Regardless, this is a dick move on Disney's part, and I do not agree with with it. Much like I would also not agree with legal action against Disney from Tezuka Productions, this poorly thought out dispute doesn't really hold any weight towards the legitimacy of this controversy in one way or the other, but it's often mentioned by those who cover this controversy, so I figured I'd make it clear that I do not agree with Disney on this one. Like I said, I am very pro-art and creativity, and Disney as a company has been consistently restrictive on their copyrights. They are largely responsible for copyrights being extended to the ridiculous length that they are today. There are plenty of legitimate criticisms to make against them as a company, and this is one of them, even if it now seems likely that this film was only even made to capitalize off of The Lion King's success. As for the accusation that The Lion King ripped off Kimba, however,
I disagree. I disagree, Gary.
Anyway, that's all I have to say about this particular film. I cannot for the life of me understand why so many people are so insistent to use footage from this film in their arguments against The Lion King, but whatever, I guess. Let's move on to the next Kimba thing. In the year 2000, a Kimba short film was created to be shown exclusively at the Kyoto Tezuka Museum. There's really not all that much to it, and it just feels like more of the same Kimba thing with a different animation style. Once again, with this releasing well after The Lion King, it should not be included in these comparisons, but I guess that doesn't stop some people for some reason. And finally, in 2009, we have Jungle Emperor Leo, The Brave Can Change the Future. Now, I haven't seen anyone use this film in their comparisons, even though technically it would be just as legitimate as using the previous two. Regardless, I've already talked about all the other Kimba shit anyway, so I might as well give you an idea of what this one's like. This particular film feels like it's probably the biggest departure from what Kimba actually is. It seems needlessly modernized at points and pretty cliched. It kind of starts to lose its identity in a way. At points it just felt like I was watching Digimon or something. They also try really hard to be cute for most of the movie. Which makes for a really jarring tonal shift in the film's third act. Basically, human beings have destroyed the environment because they don't give a shit, so then they build an island called the Neo Jungle so the animals can hang out there instead. And rather than the animals being able to talk like the other Kimba properties, in this one, this little boy is basically just Dr. Dolittle. Anyway, this panther named Toto is kind of a dick, and the humans are like, man, we gotta get rid of him. But he's just way too fucking powerful and nothing they do works. Which is weird because they already captured all of these animals to bring to the Neo Jungle, but Toto's just too strong, there's nothing they can do. So they release a bunch of carnivorous locusts just to kill this one panther. And these things really hate birds too, I guess. And only after they release these killing machines do they realize that the boss man's son is out there. But I guess it doesn't matter because Kimba's dad manages to destroy the mother locust, and none of the other locusts work without that one. It just happened to work out, I guess. And now this finger dart addicted boss man just decides that he wants to kill all of the animals and replace them with clones, and I do not understand his motivation whatsoever.
でも中には絶滅危惧種もいるんです社長。
もう少しで私たちは歴史に名を残す。動物は勝利。
It's kind of a dumb movie. All I know is that it's very, very important to please quietly in the hall. Apparently just one sign didn't do the trick. Kimba spends a lot of the movie just being a little bitch who can't jump over this stupid cliff gap, but then his dad dies trying to save Toto for no reason, and then he leads all the animals to fight the humans so that they don't get exterminated. Apparently you could just go through an entrance to get under the island where the humans are hanging out. Kinda makes their carnivorous locust plan seem a bit more stupid, doesn't it? Not to mention the excessive methods they're using to exterminate the animals now. Anyway, they all fight a bunch, and there's this one guy with a taser stick, and they push him in the pool, and they're like, yay, we got him. And then the thing that Kimba needs to get to is across a gap, and now he has to jump. You get it, it's this reincorporation of that stupid fucking jump he's been trying to do the whole movie, but he couldn't because he was scared. And just as he's about to muster up some courage, the bald man shows back up and hits the bird and then falls off the building and dies. He literally just showed back up to hit the bird and then fell and died. It was really funny. So yeah, obviously Kimba makes the jump and saves the day, and some bullshit happens and things blow up. Toto saves the main characters and decides he's just gonna stay behind and die. Then they walk through a tunnel and everything's happy. The end. So, now that you have an idea of what these movies and shows actually are, I think it's time to address the rest of these similarity controversies with that context in mind. Let's start out by going over the rest of these character similarities. One of the most common criticisms against The Lion King is that its cast of characters seems to mirror characters found in Kimba.
Every animal character in Kimba the White Lion has an analog in The Lion King.
But after actually having watched the show, it becomes pretty clear that these character comparisons only work if you strip away everything that the character actually is. Let's start with Polly and Zazu. Now, if you've only seen videos from the Kimba crowd and haven't actually watched the show, you'd probably assume that Polly is kind of like a head servant, major domo type character like Zazu. Well, as it turns out, that is not true. Like, sure, he's in the main cast of characters and he's also a bird, but beyond those two incredibly reductive similarities, these are not the same characters at all. Polly Cracker is literally just a dumb comic relief bird who gets angry all the time. He is not a character with any assigned royal duties, he is just a friend of Kimba. What defines Zazu as a character is that he has a strong sense of responsibility and tradition and order. He fulfills his role as a royal assistant and tries his best to avoid conflict at every turn, whereas Polly is just a dumb bird with anger problems. Without any exaggeration, the most defining character trait of Polly is that he's angry and wants to fight all the time. And if you don't believe me, just watch this.
I've spent all morning practicing to be nice. I'm going to teach you a lesson.
Where's the one?
Oh, what a dirty trick. Wait till I get my hands on the greedy pig who ate it. He'll get that on purpose. He's a hell of a dog. Get out of here, buddy. You'll think he's doing bad. All right. I'll tell you. Oh, you ought to be punched in the nose. All of you. What is that truth anybody could have done? You're all talking nonsense. That's what you're doing. Lucky, that's the dumbest thing you've ever said. It means they're the ones who've been doing all the dirty work. There's walk. You made me a big blow. Well, but I can beat you up single-handed. I'll give him the old 1, 2, like this, and this, and this.
Why should I want to say anything?
Then be quiet and let me tell it. How's that laughing? This is a wedding. Oh, yeah? That's what you think. This happens to be a private wedding ceremony, and nobody invited you to, so you better get out. What would your mother and father say to this, Kimba? They'd be ashamed, that's what. Hey, you're over the speed limit, Speedy. Why did you do that, Gargoyle? Why? You knew the hole was there. I can't swim. You could have found some instead of a trap. Couldn't you? We don't want you to spoil our plans to honor Caesar. Oh, no, you won't. Not if I can help it. Cold it. No. Don't you know you're not supposed to make so much noise in the hospital? What's the big idea? Stop it short like that. You think I told you about this so that you can go sightseeing for monsters? The trouble is everybody's getting too soft. You do a little work and you're ready to fall asleep. It's all your fault. You said the farm would be safe because they were your relatives. You're just too stupid. That wasn't nice. Well, I'm not taking this anymore.
Is that what salmon means?
Quiet! Last one who called me Fuzzy Top. I bet. I'll teach you to call me Fuzzy Top. You big nose fat fool.
Then there's a talking bird that appears, and its role is function, dramatically. It is virtually the same thing.
Yeah, this is totally Zazu, guys. Sorry, but you're not allowed to have a bird character in an animated lion movie because Kimba already did that. Doesn't matter that they're not the same species and they act nothing alike. Sorry, Kimba invented birds. And to make things worse, he looks a hell of a lot more similar to this Disney character from 1942. This comparison is honestly pretty fucking ridiculous. Another common comparison is between Rafiki and Daniel, and although their character traits are definitely more alike than Polly and Zazu's, they are still incredibly different. Now, just like Polly, Daniel is a friend of Kimba's. His main character trait is that he is old, and because he's seen as an older figure in Kimba's life, there are moments in the series where he does make suggestions to Kimba. But although the Kimba crowd pretends as though this therefore makes him a wise and virtuous old sage, the reality is that he's just a stereotypical cranky old man.
What do you mean, will I be able to do it? I'm an elder in this jungle and a very determined bamboo. Come on down from there!
Now!
Get off that rock before it falls and takes you with it. Come down here.
No!
I'm too old and you know it. Oh, be quiet, you big mouth. This is too much. Let's face it, I'm not as young as I used to be.
Rafiki is essentially a crazy witch doctor character who is intrinsically connected with the spirit of nature. And when he gives advice to Simba, it's not because he's a cranky old man who just happens to be his friend. He uses his wisdom and connection with nature to discover that Simba's alive, and he actively travels to find him so that he can bring back balance to nature. He is incredibly wacky and charismatic, and the unfathomable wisdom of this character is absolutely essential to Simba's arc. Based on what we see in this film, he is a character that knows more than any other character, whereas Daniel Baboon is basically just crazy old Grandpa Joe Biden.
Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids.
He is not a vessel of infinite wisdom, and there are parts in the show where he's just plain wrong.
Those men took your mother and father away from you. You have to pay them back.
You know what would happen if I took revenge on those men? Don't you, Daniel? There'd never be any peace in the jungle because somebody would always be taking revenge on somebody else.
Not only has he given terrible advice, but there are episodes where Kimba actively has to stop him from doing things that are irrational. And regardless of how rational this character is, he is still not really defined as being a wise and virtuous old sage like the Kimba crowd is claiming. The reason why Kimba looks up to him at points in the show is because he's an older figure in Kimba's life. There are points in the show where Kimba refers to him as an uncle.
Uncle Daniel, I apologize.
And because of this, he does sometimes serve a similar purpose in the show, but he's mostly just an old tooth that is often used as a comedic punching bag.
Are you going to let those men get away from here? Do something!
I made your point.
Don't be a stubborn old baboon.
I'm not much for this spot.
All right.
Stop that! Wiley, I said stop that! You won't get away with this, you juvenile delinquent, you hear?
Maybe that's what you like.
Hey, what's happening anyway? What do you mean I couldn't have done it alone? No! Knock it off! Knock it
I should also mention that these visual comparisons with both characters holding a stick are pretty fucking bullshit. Rafiki's staff was not only essential to the story, but it was a part of the character's design. He carried it around with him everywhere because it is a part of his character. This stick that Daniel Baboon is holding, however, is one that he just picks up to help him in a fight. Daniel Baboon is seen holding a stick for a total of 20 seconds in the entire series. It is just something they gave him to hit other characters with because realistically he's the only animal that could pick up a weapon. Does anyone seriously believe that the Lion King creators saw the 20 seconds over the course of the entire series of Daniel Baboon holding a stick and thought, oh, a baboon holding a stick, that's perfect, let's include that as part of Rafiki's character? Really? Once again, these are not the same characters at all, and the only way you can pretend that's the case is if you strip away everything about them. Another incredibly common comparison is between Scar and Claw. Now, this particular criticism is at the very least understandable. After all, they are both villain characters with darker fur and a wound on their left eye. They also both want to be king, although it is pretty standard for villains to want ultimate control and power. Now, once again, their personalities are nothing alike, but before we get into that, I want to break down the individual aspects that do make them similar. Now, if you remember the section where I talked about Rhapsody Rabbit and the Cat Concerto, the similarities between those two films were essentially logical progressions based on previously existing common ideas and tropes. If you start out with the idea that Hungarian Rhapsody